After 25 years in the Secret Service, what's the single biggest myth people believe about spotting lies?
That they're good at it. I mean, that's what it comes down to is people think they are good at seeing someone talk to them and I can tell that they're lying, or they have a hunch, or there's an old wives' tale, or they watch a YouTube video or something like that, and he touched his nose. Oh my God, he crossed his arms. Therefore, that's a lie. That is completely incorrect. And the best research that we've seen is if you watch two stories, one truthful, one not truthful, you're about 54% effective at determining if that's truth or fiction. And that's the world's largest study with 10,000 people involved. So we are very bad at this.
Very interesting. What have you learned from being in rooms with presidents, criminals, and everyone in between? What's the most surprising thing about human nature that you've learned?
Well, we're all narcissists in a certain way. I mean, maybe not clinically, but everyone wants to look out for their own best interest, right? Whether you're looking at the president, former president, other heads of state, every September this time of the year, the Secret Service with diplomatic security, we protect thousands of protectees in New York City that come in for the United Nations. And in all these years, all the protectees that I've worked with, high profile, low profile, it doesn't matter. They're all the same. They get up, they put their socks on, they go about their business just like everybody else. So they're normal people and they have normal interests and normal needs. But at the end of the day, people are going to look out for their own best interests. And that's what we need to understand. And I've seen that with scammers. I've seen that with pedophiles. I've seen that with presidents, is that once again, we are animals, we are mammals, and we want our basic needs met. But also if we have an opportunity that puts ourselves and our families above all else, that we're going to take it.
Hmm. Perhaps before we dive deeper, you could share just a little bit about your history, your Secret Service work, and where it's led you to today.
Oh, I appreciate you asking. Yeah, small town kid from the middle of America, and going through grad school, I interned with the Secret Service, and it was one of those things where President Clinton came into the town I was at, and I was more impressed, not with President Clinton, all that was great to meet him. I was more impressed with the Secret Service agents that were doing protection. I just thought, wow, these are people that, are putting their lives on the line, putting their country above their self. And this is something I really looked into. And just great people, very morally sound individuals, men and women that had a strong purpose. And it was something that I pursued. And after grad school, I was fortunate enough to be able to get in and started in Chicago. And a lot of people don't know that the Secret Service was founded for investigations to stop counterfeiting in 1865. And then it evolved over the next 50 years to do protection. And so we kind of always had a dual role mission. So the good part about it is you'd get to work financial crimes investigations, and then you would do protection. So it really was kind of, you got to go into the crayon box a little bit different every single day and decide what you were going to do. And then I got in polygraph, and I did that for 17 years. So for me, getting to do criminal polygraphs, Secret Service polygraphs, once again, was great to be able to, especially in the cases involving victimization of children, because, protectees of us, they get 24-hour guard and they are looked after, but these kids can't choose the environments that they're born into. So being able to work those cases and hopefully bring justice to those cases was something that was felt very good for me.
Can you tell us a little bit about polygraph? Because people have seen it on a movie or on a crime TV series, but not everyone really knows how it works, how accurate it is. Perhaps you could give us a little rundown.
Sure. So, polygraph started in the early 1900s. It's a mousetrap that's been around a long time, and Secret Service was the first agency to really adopt it in the 1930s. And then it morphed from criminal work to applicant work in the 60s and 70s. And what I mean by applicant work is you want to know that these people, especially in the national security realm, are not working for a foreign intelligence service. Also, what kind of criminal activity may they have conducted in their past? And regardless of what people think about polygraph, and I know, Australia, New Zealand, these are countries that don't utilize it. Okay. And there's no, I don't think it should be used in court, but we use it as a triage tool to basically shape our investigations. And I guess the way to look at it is imagine a mammogram. It's not perfect. It's a tool. It may be 85% effective, let's say similar to maybe polygraph. But within women's health, my wife was a big beneficiary of a mammogram because it caught cancer early. And then there were other diagnostic tests that she did to confirm it, biopsies, MRIs. And then ultimately she got the care she wanted. For us, polygraph is the same way. We use it on the right person at the right time to shape an investigation to determine, do we need to shine a little more light on this person, or do we need to shine a little bit of less light on this person? So for us, it's just a tool. It's not perfect. And as long as you go in with that and don't think it's the end all be all, polygraph definitely has its place in law enforcement and the intelligence community.
Makes a lot of sense. And even just putting someone in that situation where you can monitor them closely, it must reveal all kinds of little cues that you wouldn't get otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want you to think of it as like a magnetometer. So a lot of times with polygraph, I would be traveling in the United States and I would go, and we travel armed, so I'd have to meet the pilot where I'm traveling, and the pilot would say to me, "Oh, Secret Service, where are you going?" I'm going to Dayton, Ohio. Why are you going there? I got a polygraph there. Polygraph, those things don't work, and I heard you could beat them. That's the question I always get. And I say, well, there's about 300 people about to get on this plane that went through a magnetometer. And that magnetometer is not perfect, right? But you trust it because it catches the majority of the things that would come onto this plane. But just as importantly, it keeps people and has that inherent fear of, hey, I might get caught, so I'm not going to bring that thing on the plane. So polygraph has a lot of that same utility in that a background check is not going to pick up what Brad Hook did typically when he was 12 years old,
Yeah.
right? People move, neighbors move. They say, oh, he was such a good little kid. How many times do we hear serial killers when they interview the neighbors? Oh, Johnny was such a good kid, right? Because we don't
Yeah.
pick up on that.
Yeah.
And to the second point, if you don't mind me, expanding,
Please.
is when it comes to countermeasures, everybody always says you can beat a polygraph. And the way I like to look at it is this: okay, go to the internet, go to a TikTok, go to whatever, and it will tell you do this, do that in order to affect the outcome of a polygraph. Well, we look at the same things too. Okay. And if that instrument worked, or if that magnetometer didn't work, TSA wouldn't use it. Okay. If it didn't work, why does the CIA, NSA, Secret Service, FBI still use polygraph? Because it works and we know what to look for. And also, I would tell the pilot, I'd say, okay, how long was your book for the 747? They'd be like this big. And I'd be like, theoretically, you could have someone read through that and know everything about the 747, right? Yep. But I said, if you brought them in here and you covered up the windows and the instrumentation panel was black and they didn't know what their inputs or what they were suppressing or what they were doing or the tack in the shoe, this much, that much, how squeeze here, squeeze that. If they didn't know how that was affecting how the plane was rising, falling, turning, they'd crash the plane, right? And I say, that's the same thing if somebody tries to do countermeasures. They don't know what I'm seeing on the other side of the screen, which is a problem. So we utilize it. It's very effective, and it really brings to light, even with applicants. We have a lot of applicants, Brad, that come in for our organization, and they would admit to rape, robbery, even murder. And these were, other than what we knew, they had no criminal record. So it definitely has its place, and it's something but it needs to be used in the right setting at the right time with the right person.
Yeah. And I imagine you've seen people trying to hack their way through it with deep breathing techniques and whatever. And then you notice visually, well, the person's doing something that's unusual.
Yeah, it's like a car mechanic. They know what a normal car an engine sounds like, and they know one that has a little pitter patter in it, right? And they can
Yeah.
typically say it's this valve, it's this cylinder. It's the same thing with physiology. You know what normal physiology looks like, and when it changes, why is it changing? It's kind of like if somebody does a urinalysis and they put water in it, or they put some other product in it to cover it up. Why are you doing that? You're doing that to hide something. So it's amazing that so many more people get removed from potential employment for doing these things than false positives in the process, meaning they have a much higher chance of sitting there, being honest on their forms than the person that does countermeasures. You're more likely to get caught doing countermeasures than being a false positive.
Let's talk about first impressions, because this is something that you focus on in your book. We'll talk about the book shortly. What are first impressions and how can we hack them? And maybe more importantly, what should we watch for to understand if someone else is hacking first impressions on us?
Yeah, that's a great way that you framed that question, Brad, and I appreciate you did that. I've not had somebody kind of ask that in that way, and I think some of that's because I know in some of your books and some of your talks you talk about survival values, in that you have to hit that. It's almost Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where we try to be people's friends too many times, not realizing that that's going to take multiple interactions. We have to make sure that the person that we're talking to, and for me, it's very important because when I was doing interrogations, I would have to make sure that these person's survival values, that fight or flight was met. I would have to sneak past that amygdala before I could talk to them, because if I triggered that, that was problematic for me. Okay. So when it comes to first impressions, I want to look at it like this. It's like evolution. When our ancestors many, many millennia ago were on the plains, and they were looking for prey, or they were prey, right? They
Hmm.
didn't want to be prey, but they were. They were not the top of the food chain that we are today. So what would they do? They would use their two best senses for this, their eyes and their ears, because that's how we can look and from a mile away and see what's coming at us. Or we can hear that branch break and say, wow, there's something, I don't know what it is, but it's something bad there. And that gut instinct, that cortisol, that adrenaline causes us to climb up the tree, arm ourselves, tribal community come together. And so those are two senses that are still hardwired into us today. So how can I look at this offensively? And what I mean by that is I don't mean it from a manipulation standpoint, but if I want to get communication with people, they need to be able to see my hands. They need to be able to see my body. My body language needs to be congruent with my message. I need to have that eyebrow flash. I need to give that subtle every once in a while, head tilt to show my carotid. I need to give those friend signs of ventral fronting, meaning what does a dog do when it's comfortable with you? It rolls over and shows you its belly. We don't typically do that because that's a very sensitive area of our body. So that's something that I want to be frontally aligned. I want to have very soft eyes with about 75% eye contact, little eyebrow flash so I don't have contempt, so that they can see my hands. And then handshake. It's something, Brad, that we all mess up, but it's cross cultural. I don't care if you're in New Zealand or you're in South Carolina. When I show my hands, the lightest part of my hand is the lightest colored part of my body. It's a flash. And it means I don't have a weapon. I'm not going to hurt you. It's not balled up like I'm going to punch you. And I present it. And when I present it, it needs to be dry and it needs to be warm. And there's a couple hacks we can do for that. I put antiperspirant on my right hand. All right. It's always going to be dry. And as a result, you're going to code that as confidence, or at least not anxiety. How many times have you shaken a hand, Brad, and it's cold and clammy, right? What does that say to you? This person's
Mm.
nervous. They're not confident. Also, when you're at a party or something like this, don't put a cold water bottle in your right hand. Have that in your left hand. If I have a hot coffee, Starbucks, whatever, I'm going to have it in my right hand because it's going to be warm. If I'm at a function and I'm, sitting down, I'm going to be seated on my hand. If I know I'm about to shake somebody's hand, that'll warm my hand up. It'll also dry it. The last thing we want to do though is warm it up and dry it right in front of them, because
Yeah.
that's just a code for I am nervous, but I'm trying to control that. And then we want to come in at a 45-degree angle. We want to meet them right above the navel, and it's not a shake, Brad. It's a hold. Okay, it is too many times we do this United Nations kind of
Like
handshake where we're at a photo. We don't have palsy. Okay, so let's don't act like we do. Right?
so
I just want to do a 1 second. I want to hold, and if I am doing it correctly, I will typically be at about a 2 o'clock. And the reason we do that is people pronate all day, Brad, and as a result, when they lift their hands, it's slightly pronated. So I want to be at that 2 o'clock position, and it just fits like a glove. I don't want to get the bones of their hand like I'm shaking the hand of a queen, and I don't want to be checking their pulse. That's coming in too flat. Come down at a 45-degree angle, look at them when you connect, and then go back to eye contact, or look at the hand connection when you connect, and then go back to eye contact after that. It's the world's perfect handshake. If you do that, you're 90% of the way there. And if I slightly lower my tone just a little bit, and also slow down just a little bit, that is a big friend sign, because, as you know, a higher pitched voice denotes nervousness and anxiety. So if I hack that just a little bit and bring that tonality down a little bit, I'm going to come across, more trustworthy. But as you said with the question, what's the other side of that equation? Confirmation bias. Some of the best scammers in the world do exactly just what I said, right? And what's our biases? That little horns and halos, the little devil and angel on our shoulder. We're like, oh, he seems so confident. He seems controlled. I'm not getting taken here. I'm not getting scammed here. And the next thing you know, we get taken advantage of. So I want to make a good first impression, but I definitely, in a business setting and a relationship setting, don't want to look at a first impression as if it's not a do or die situation, don't treat it as such. And don't make that impression. Don't let them make that impression upon you.
So interesting. Now, what about between sexes? Because there can be an awkward moment sometimes. You're in a business setting and you shake hands with all the men, and then there's a woman, and it feels a little bit. Do you just do it no matter what?
Yeah, no matter what. I don't think handshakes are gender specific. I know some people, maybe culturally, certain countries may have more of a taboo with this. I think it's
Yes.
when it gets to that, we have close friends now. Is it a hug or is it not a hug? During
Yeah.
COVID, it was, are we doing a fist bump here? Are we doing, the
Yeah.
worst thing is when you went in for that fist bump and they were going in for the handshake.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I would identify early as this is going to be a handshake, and that would like lessen the anxiety. Um, but that's usually the more
Mm.
uncomfortable. Is this going to be a hug or is it not going to be a
Yeah.
hug?
Yeah.
Typically, a handshake is always a great starting point.
Yeah. What about when people come in? I'm sure you've experienced this, but they come in like that with the palm up for you to. What is that all about?
And you know what? That's fine, because they may be just trying to do kind of what I talked about, is just be so open. Um, and I'm just going to pancake that. I've shaken hands with every horrible person that I've ever talked to. So I talked to, we worked with a lot of politicians, but I also worked with murderers, robbers, and rapists. And every single person, we'd start and you'd end with a handshake. Primacy and recency effect. People remember at a higher level the first things and the last things of an interaction. So if we can hack that handshake and that initial first couple words out of our mouth, that interaction, we're really getting the best bookends of the interaction taken care of. So I shake every human being's hand. I've had one person refuse, and he was somebody that had just got tased, and I think a dog had bit him, and he was a bad guy too. So I can understand why he didn't want to shake my hand, law enforcement individual's hand at that.
Super interesting. And so being the one who initiates it shows a level of confidence because I've had interactions where both people are trying to figure out, do we do this or not?
Yeah.
Is it best just to reach out?
Reach out. It is so cross-culturally accepted.
Yeah.
And I'm 27 years in of doing this, of thousands of times with horrible people that I shared nothing in common with many of them. And when I initiate that handshake, they will shake my hand.
Yeah.
And even at a subconscious level, I'm getting a benefit of that. When that skin touch and you get that haptic connection, those neurochemicals that Paul Zak will talk about and other PhDs will talk about, is that oxytocin will be released when that happens. So we definitely want to take advantage of that.
Mm-hmm. Any other tips on creating instant rapport with a stranger, a client, or even a suspect?
Yeah, so we talked about, some of the initial ones as far as our voice, our vocal tonality. Also, I want to be in a private environment typically. Okay. Sometimes that's not going to be the case, but if I know I'm going to be talking about something sensitive, I want you to think of this. If we talk about the Catholic faith,
Yeah.
what about a confessional allows for good conversation, Brad? What aspects of a confessional?
Oh, the privacy. There's,
Yeah.
I suppose they can't see your face.
They can't see your face. It's non-judgmental, right? So it's private,
Yeah, true.
which is great, but it's also non-judgmental. Meaning, if we were talking and you didn't see me, I didn't see you, but you told me something, and I was like, "Wow, really?" Right? Not just in my facial expression with that
Mm.
contempt, but also with
Yeah.
the just spoken word. Really? Wow, you did that? So
Yeah.
definitely the privacy, but also the non-judgment that I'm imparting
Mm.
upon you. If there was a microphone like these wonderful microphones we have, if it was in the confessional, confessionals probably wouldn't be very effective, right?
Yeah.
But doctor's office, therapist's office, and confessionals all share the same thing. They have highly educated people that don't judge you, provide you advice, or give you some type of treatment. And for the most part, it stays fairly anonymous. It's like having a good friend, right? I talk about in my book, being people's buddy, in that, if you were going through relationship issues and you had a breakup, Brad, what would a good buddy do? Well, they'd blame the other person for those actions. Well, they would understand. They would diminish the impact of the actions because they'd say, "Oh, there's other fish in the sea. You're going to find something better." And they'd focus on the why instead of the what, and they'd make you feel better at the end of it. That's what good friends do. People that you trust, and you respect, and they don't judge you for your actions, but hold you with accountability. Those are the best friends, right? They're there for you, but they're also going to hold you to a certain standard, which is what we need. That's the wolf pack you need to create.
You talk about the lyrics and the soundtrack and dance of communication. How do
Mm-hmm.
words and tone and body language work together to build trust or break it?
Yeah, no, it's great. So my best friend over the last 35 years is deaf. And I've learned from that, I have to be present in communication. You have to be there. You have to look. I had to look at his face and he had to look at mine. Um, I learned sign, and then, but more importantly, he could read lips. But usually, facial expressions and my body language is what would really bring a conversation. It was almost like Dolby surround sound for him. Is my body language. And so I realized early on that you have words. We all have a working dictionary of 25,000 to 35,000 words that we put in different orders to mean different things. But they're just words, okay? But if I think of it as this, it's a text. Like if you, from your significant other, if you get a text that says "I'm fine" with no emoji, what the heck does
I
that
was
mean?
about to
It's
say
probably
that.
not
Yeah.
good. It's probably not
Mm.
good, right? But if you heard that person say, "Oh, I'm fine," versus "I'm fine," or if you saw their face to see the contempt, that would round out that conversation, and it's so much more important. We've went from Shakespeare back to cave paintings, all right, basically, right, with emojis. That's how we're communicating. And I mean, think of it like this: a Pearl Jam song, if you want to go US, or let's say Red Hot Chili Peppers. My jiu-jitsu
Mhm.
instructor is a huge Red Hot Chili Peppers fan. He's from Brazil, never understood a lick of English, but Red Hot Chili Peppers was his favorite band. He didn't understand the lyrics. He could care less about the words, but he saw Flea and he saw Anthony Kiedis and he saw Chad Smith jamming on the drums.
Yeah.
The way they spoke and the way they looked when they spoke is more important than the stupid words that you worry about.
That's interesting. That's so interesting. So they get the sentiment, but the words don't really matter, and the same applies in our everyday life.
Yeah, how many Pearl Jam songs do people even know the lyrics to? It's Eddie Vedder saying "shang blah 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 blah." Nobody knows, right? But they think they know. But it's once again, it's the
Yeah.
everything else other than the words. It's so much more important. And now we're just in this asynchronous communication where we send texts, we wait, we get a text back, then we think about how am I going to respond, and then oh shoot, let me put it in Chat GPT to get the best response. So it's just Chat GPT talking back to each other, right? And
Yeah.
the problem with that is we people that get in a conversation like we're having right now, Brad, if we're doing a job
Mm,
interview, people are they're devolving in their ability to have in person
mm.
eye to eye communications because they're not used to that anymore.
That's what I love about podcasting is getting to have
Yes.
conversations with no technology in my environment, except the obvious, but no phones, no messages, using your brain as a human to have a conversation. It's a skill that I'm afraid many
It's
people, especially younger people, are really losing.
and it's going to be a skill, Brad, that's going to even be more valuable, like you say, here in another 5 years. Okay, so there's other things that we can take advantage of, though, in regards to modern, information. Is that just like you look at your guests and you go do kind of a dive into what makes them tick, other works they've done, maybe books they've written. Is that I can do the same thing when I was talking to bad guys. Is that 20, 30 years ago, people, if they wrote a diary, they'd put it under their, in between their mattress, they put it in their nightstand. Now people's diaries are online. They're in their Instagram posts, their TikTok videos. So it's amazing how we can leverage that. And before a conversation even starts, we can find out people's pain points and we can find out what makes them tick and areas of interest. And not from the standpoint of maybe manipulating, but I can come up with interesting potential topics because when somebody's talking about things in their leisure activities, things they do in their free time, typically, especially if I let them teach me about it, they don't think I'm interrogating them. Their cortisol levels go down, their dopamine levels absolutely jump through the roof, and they enjoy talking about things. Like it would be like if we were on a plane, Brad, and let's say we're flying from the world's longest flight, right? From Auckland to New York.
Yep,
We got a
that's it.
long flight. We got a lot to talk about. Neither one of us can sleep. And I ask you, I'm not going to ask about your family, right? That's too personal and you can't choose necessarily that. I may ask you about your job. I may ask you about where you went to school, things like that. But if I ask you what you do in your free time, you're going to talk about surfing, right? You're going to talk about all this other stuff that I have no idea about, right? And I'm going to ask you about it. I'm like, dude, when did you get started? How do you do that? What kind of board do you use? For the next 15 hours, you're going to explain surfing to me. I'm going to come into knowledge, but more importantly, your dopamine is going to be associated with me. All that great, things that you're talking about, you're going to associate with me. And I'm not saying anything. I'm just being an active listener. I'm just, following on. Oh, really? Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay. I'm doing that. You're the one doing all the talking. And you're like, wow, you're such a great listener. Wow. And subconsciously, we're now friends. And I did nothing. But what's the problem in communication nowadays, Brad? What happens? Let's say I surf too. I ask you, what do you like to do in your free time? Oh, I like to surf. Me too. I don't let you bathe in your moment. I don't let you educate me. I do this, well, me too. And before you know it, I never get to the other side of the iceberg of what makes you tick. And I'm sure you've seen it. Oh, what do you like to do? I like to run. Me too. Oh, I did a 5K. Me too. I did a marathon. Oh, yeah. I did a half Ironman. Oh, I did a half Ironman. Oh, yeah. I did a full Ironman. Oh, you did Florida? Oh, I did Wisconsin. It's much harder. Come on, right? Let people bathe in what they do. Let them educate you, and you're going to get your time. For instance, let's say I surf, and I ask you what kind of board you use, and where do you go, and what kind of I don't know anything about surfing, so I apologize. But let's say I did, and I threw in some very educated questions. What are you going to do? You're going to be like, "Wow, this guy must surf. You surf?" There's my avenue now to start talking about surfing. So you got the dopamine, you associated me with it, and now I also then get to get the reciprocity and the connection of we both surf.
I like that. So if you want someone to open up, just be a good listener, but you have to actively listen. You can't be hacking that and pretending. You really have to put in the effort.
You got to take the earbuds out, right? Nobody talks on planes anymore because everybody's got earbuds in, right? Nobody talks to the gym anymore because everybody's got earbuds in.
Yeah.
So that's the problem. And, the other thing about it is, look, the one thing that the Secret Service taught me is I protected communists. I protected right-wing conservatives. I protected everybody in between. And I made no political beefs one way or the other. I stayed apolitical. And in today's society, that's very difficult, right? Especially here in America right now. We have a two-party system. We don't have the, parliamentary type system with a prime minister and multiple different, political classes. So as a result, we have these echo chambers that are very hard to get out of. So what I have to do is I have to look at both sides. And then I also have to understand the facts in the middle. And if you do that, if you know what the facts are, it's much easier to kind of navigate to that other side. The problem is that right now, depending on where you get your media from, you may not even have heard the facts that the other side is dealing with, right? I mean, because it's just filtered out. We're so pushed down to a certain rabbit hole based upon our likes and interests. So in order to avoid that, you really need to stay in the middle, and you need to find data and a fact source that allows you to be able to go to both sides versus staying in your own echo chamber, which you're never going to be able to go to the other side once you do that.
Yeah. And the algorithm prioritizes extremes because that's what's going to attract attention, which is pushing people further toward the extremes because they only see the worst of what the other side thinks. So it's more challenging to find that grounded, middle of the road, sensible opinion nowadays. And I have to say, even in little old sleepy New Zealand, you're finding people are mimicking what they see in the US. And I think it's happening everywhere. It's kind of like, well, let's get it more extreme in our views because it's more, anger is an activating emotion, right?
It is. And it's surprising how the bots, by a lot of foreign countries are really helping hype that up, right? Because they see a controversial topic. If we wanted something to get viral out of this communication, Brad, I would say something maybe that I didn't maybe really believe, but it was something that was controversial and it would get stuff on both sides. Yeah. Like, that's why I never talk like politics, or if I'm on a podcast, I won't talk about an assassination attempt or something like that. But let's say I did. Let's say I talked about something that happened, with Trump, and you're going to have people on both sides, and then bots are going to get involved. And before you know it, holy cow, Brad Hook's podcast just went viral, right? As a result of us talking about something controversial. So it actually forces people to be controversial because they want the status and the likes and the followers, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah, I was listening to the radio yesterday. I don't often listen to it, but I just turned on in the car, and they were saying the biggest problem we have in the school system in New Zealand is Andrew Tate, uh, because he's making young boys misogynistic. And uh, I think we've got different things to worry about. But, sure,
Yeah.
he says extreme things, and he has said some horrible things. But I think his real message is one of empowerment for young people. Like, take control of your finances, take control of your discipline. Not that I agree with everything else that he says, but it's extreme.
Absolutely. And, I can say, having a young son, I can say there's probably a lot more problems that I'm worried about than Andrew Tate.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, what are some reliable ways to catch someone being dishonest? We all have interactions in our daily lives, whether it's buying a car or a business deal. Any hints?
Yeah. So it's really tough if we're in an open ended statement, Brad. So if I said, tell me what you did today, you could take me wherever you want to take me, and you could omit things. And that's where most lies happen. And most lies happen with people that we care about. Sometimes it's face saving. They don't want to hurt someone's feelings. How do I look in this dress? Oh, you look great. When maybe we don't truly think that. But lies are a social lubricant. And if we took it away, we'd probably be in trouble. Society would fall apart. So some lies are okay. It depends on the context. And so an open-ended statement, if I ask you, what did you do today? I have to ask that question if I'm doing an investigation, but it's very difficult to say when you're lying. Now, if I find a point of contention and I ask you a yes or no question, here's the best way to do it, Brad. So if I said, what's a popular, let's say you're on a diet, and let's keep this kind of very PG here. Let's say
Yeah.
you're on a diet. What's a really good like ice cream shop in New Zealand?
I don't go to many, but there's one called, what's it called? Cones. Let's just call it Cones.
Cones, right? So if I
Yeah.
just said, what'd you do today, right?
Yeah.
It'd be very easy for you to edit out the fact that you went to Cones and got a triple dipped, chocolate dipped, whatever, butter pecan ice cream, right? It'd be
Yeah.
easy to leave that out. But if I said, did you go to Cones? What do you have to do now? You have to make a decision, right, on whether you're
Yeah.
going to lie or not. And so there's a couple things that we look at. Delay, I think, is the easiest. All right. Delay and truth sandwiches. And what I mean by truth sandwiches, you see liars do this a lot, or politicians do this a lot, where they're asked a question and they don't answer this question, but they answer another question. They're truthful on
Yeah.
the other question, but they don't answer this question. It's kind of once again, it's a truth sandwich. It's truth. They go over the lie and then they talk truth, and the cortisol never gets affected because they never address the lie. That's up to us to force people to have them answer that question. But if I know you and I've been talking to you for 30 minutes and I provide you stimulus, and a tenth of a second later, you give me a response. If that all of a sudden changes when I ask you about cones and it's no, no, and then it's no, there's a delay. And the other thing is, if I had to put an exclamation point or a question mark next to that answer, no should be said this way. No, it shouldn't be said no. When you hear no, that is almost like them going, does Brad believe me? It's almost like and I can't tell you how many hundreds of times I've seen that, where I'll ask a myriad of questions. No, no, no. And you have to have an ear for it. You have to be actively listening. And is it 100%? Absolutely not. But should you put a red flag there? Absolutely. When somebody uses any ly statement, usually, normally, typically, for the most part, that's a problem, right? Did you do this? Oh, usually I don't do that. That's a terrible answer, right?
Yeah.
That's just saying that is a truthful answer. Usually they don't, but this time they probably did, right? So ly statements, the truth sandwich. Here's another one that's pretty good: is no, yes. When the incongruence between what they say and what their body language is pretty good. It's a unicorn moment. You don't see it a lot, but when you do, I trust the body language because they're really thinking about what to say, but what's leaking out is the body language. So if we do those 3 or 4 things, we may get ourselves up to 70% range. We're still not good at this. And if we were, we wouldn't have polygraph. And if polygraph was 100%, we wouldn't be trying to invent a better polygraph. It's just human behavior is very evolved in a tribal community to get away with bad things and to not hurt people's feelings. So we're really good at lying.
Mm. That not wanting to hurt people's feelings is an important part of it, because there can be very
Hmm.
simple lies, such as, how does my butt look in these jeans? And you're like, oh,
Right.
amazing. Or versus, um, do you think that we're going to achieve our targets this quarter? Yeah, definitely. Meanwhile, inside this is impossible, but we say it just to keep the momentum and keep life running smoothly. Would it be better to just be brutally honest most of the time?
Yeah, it would. We just haven't evolved that way. I mean, we just, in a tribal community, if we were honest, we'd get kicked out of the community. All right.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
when you choose to lie, are we lying about something big, or are we lying about how do I look in this dress? Right.
Mm, mm.
Another thing that might be interesting for your listeners is, Brad, do you know anybody that tells tall tales? Maybe spins the yarn. Maybe that's a U.S. term, spinning the
Oh,
yarn. But
I know it well. I know
uh,
well.
okay, all right.
Absolutely.
Um, Somebody that talks a lot. I don't know what you
Yeah.
call it down there, a yabber or whatever. I can't remember. But I've got a couple. I've got some good friends in Australia, and they talk to me about the bogans and the yabbers and this, that, and the other. So, um, but somebody that tells a tall tale about some athletic accomplishment, how much money
Hmm.
they make, whatever the case
Mm.
may be, and they're just going on and they're telling a story. It's easy because they're telling a story. But let's say you played soccer and you said in high school you scored 47 goals. And I know for a fact, I don't think you scored 47 goals. Let you tell your story. And then I follow it up with, wow, you scored 47 goals in high school? We turned that from the dog off the leash, walking around doing what it wants to do, to now we put the dog on the leash and we asked it a yes or no question.
Hmm.
So, what does that story turn into a lot of times? Well, I don't know how many I scored, but it was a lot, because now the spotlight is on them. And I do this with my kids a lot, where they'll be telling a story and you'll be like, wow, you went to John's house. No, we were going to go to John's house, but then we went to Sally's house. Right. So it's amazing how you can use something
Yeah.
like that without being disrespectful. And that's the key thing. People lie to us. It's how do we get information when they are lying to us without burning any bridges? And I guess the best analogy I would give is, let me throw out a hypothetical to you, Brad, and I want a little bit of just judgment from you. Okay. If you don't mind giving me some judgment,
Sure.
what
I'll do
should
my best.
happen to this man? What should happen to this man? Okay. This man fought for his country in World War One. He was decorated for his actions during World War One. And he came into politics in the 1930s. And he was very introverted, but in the 30s, he became much more extroverted. And he took over his country's military juggernaut. And if we just want to focus just on burning deaths, he burned to death over 1 million innocent civilians, burned them to death. Now let's go to the Nuremberg trials. What should happen to that person? What do you think should happen to that person? If we could go back and change history and say this person's going to get judgment, what would we do?
Hmm. Well, you would want the harshest possible punishment for them for the crimes.
Okay,
Hmm.
absolutely. And when we look at it in that context, I would agree with you. But if I told you that's Harry S. Truman, President of the United States,
Whoa.
what would you say now? That changes it, right?
Yeah.
Harry S. Truman was a veteran. Harry S. Truman came into politics in the 30s. Harry S. Truman was very introverted. When he took over for FDR, he authorized the firebombing of 17 Japanese cities. That literally, cities made of cardboard and wood that created vacuums of fire. And when that didn't work, he harnessed the power of the sun with the Manhattan Project and dropped 2 atomic weapons, the only ones ever been used against live population, and as a result caused the death of over 1 million people. So I tell you that story to say, if I was interrogating Harry S. Truman, what would I do? Who would I blame? I'd blame the Empire of Japan. They started it on December 7th, 1941. I would understand. I'd say, Harry, I understand why you felt like you do this. You had to write letters home to families that lost 5 people, 5 kids to this war. You saw the newsreels from Iwo Jima and Saipan and Peleliu. Of course you felt like we had to do something. And Harry, I would diminish impact. I'd say, Harry, you actually saved lives. You actually did an amazing thing, because if we would have had to go to the Empire of Japan and the mainland, millions of US soldiers and multi-millions of civilians would have died. And then I would demonstrate empathy by telling stories. I'd say, Harry, it's kind of like a surgeon that has a young boy that's there with a car accident and he has to make a decision. I have to cut this kid's leg off. And if I don't do it, there's a good chance the kid may die, but I'm putting him in a wheelchair forever. You made a tough decision. And then I focus on the why. But the why is because you stopped a horrible thing. It was the best, worst option. And Harry, you had harnessed the power of sun, and any other leader in the times throughout millennia would have taken that power and would have conquered the world. And what did you do? You rebuilt the world because you're a good man. You're a good man that had a tough, tough decision. So it's getting the lie is one thing. Getting the person to say I did that bad thing is another.
Wow, what a twist there. That's a great example. A great example. What can we learn from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? You mentioned it earlier on. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you can apply some of those principles to communication.
Position before submission is one of the things that I like to talk about, and that too many times people look for that TikTok hack, and it applies to jiu-jitsu and business, right? Like, oh, if you do this or you say this one word or this one sentence, you'll get the sale. Or if you do this one finishing move, you'll get there. But how do you get to that position? You get to that position because you did 5 other things. And that's the problem. They try to get good at the end part, or the sell me my pen moment, right? You hear that all the time. Sell me this pen. Mm-hmm. Sell me this pen is the closing deal. Okay. You got to get, in baseball, we have 9 innings in America. The closer is the 9th inning. You got to have somebody to do those first 8 innings. So position before submission. The other thing I talk about is master what matters most, Brad. And I'm sure this, in your, personal, professional life, it would probably resonate in that. In Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, if you look at the yearly competition this past year, there are thousands of potential moves in Jiu-Jitsu. It's been around for 100 years now. And the things that worked in 1925 still work till today. And the great part about it is if somebody comes up with a new move, you can pressure test it in real world situations where nobody gets hurt. And if it didn't work, hey, we'll just quit teaching that. I wish in interviewing, I wish in protection, I wish whatever, that we could red team things at that level to see if they work with thousands of people. And the things that work, we keep. The things that don't work, we don't keep. But the added aspect of that is, if you look at the world competition, 5 submissions typically are 90% of what causes someone to win. So 5 submissions out of 1,000. So why should a school worry about all the other nonsense, all the other thousands, and not just focus on how do you do these 5 and how do you stop these 5 from happening? And if you would do that, and the same applies with communication, make a great first impression, be a great active listener, have tactical empathy. If you master those 3 things alone, you're going to be so much effective in leveling up versus focusing on some of the other nonsense you see online.
Get those foundations locked in and
100%.
and then and apply them, practice them. For those who haven't heard about a red team, can you unpack what that means?
Yeah, basically, it's been kind of broadened out a little bit in society, but it would be like in the military. If we were planning an operation, let's say the operation by the U.S. Navy SEALs up on Abbottabad with bin Laden, they would have had multiple red teams that would have looked at their plan and said, this isn't going to work for reason 1, 2, 3, and 4. And here's the probabilities of those things happening. And then they factor that into the equation to see, is our plan a good plan? And doing that in life, when you have a business proposal, when you're going to give a presentation, having somebody look at and be that kind of red team, so to speak, is very, very helpful because they can say, wow, you really did this bad, or man, I don't know if that's going to resonate. Maybe you should try this. So that's where it's really good to have good mentors that will do that for you.
Feedback loops, improvement, iterate, learn. Yes. So for someone who wants to become good at communicating and put in place, practice some of the principles in your book, how do they start? Do they just go out into the world and start with care, or is it good to get a mentor or get someone who you can actually play with?
I mean, there's obviously a lot of great resources out there. There's a lot of great books. It depends on how deep a dive you want to take. For me, it was starting in high school doing improv. Improv for me was great because you get a scenario, you got 10 minutes with your partner to come up, and it's duet acting. And it made me turn from an introvert to an extrovert because I wasn't afraid of what people would think. I wasn't afraid of saying the wrong thing because you're going to. All right. So just, it allowed me to just get out of my shell a little bit, get out of that tortoise shell that we all have. So for me, improv, a lot of people that will do, Chris Voss talks about in his book, Never Split the Difference, as far as being on, like a suicide hotline, in that a lot of people in law enforcement that want to get good at communication will do stuff like that because it's as close as you can get to a very high pressure situation. You talk to people for hours and hours and hours, and it causes you to develop the ability to feel very comfortable. And that's another Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu principle, is be comfortable being uncomfortable. Too many people get uncomfortable and like, I quit. So exposing yourself to those opportunities, it could be Toastmasters, it could be just go to a lot of high schools, colleges have these clubs, these speaking clubs, where you can go and nobody's going to judge you because they're there for the same reasons, because they suck at it. All right. Another thing that can help people is, look, I'm not a doctor, but some people get so anxious with public speaking. You can go to your doctor and you can get, things, beta blockers that can basically put a governor on your anxiety. And as a result, instead of your heart rate going up to 150, it goes up to 110. And the difference between that 150 and 110 is a big deal when it comes to communication. So there are some hacks out there. Obviously, a great vocal warm-up. I think vocal presence is huge. I've got a little $5 a month app on my phone where every third day or so, I do a little, work on my voice to get my breath better, my vocal tonality better, my ability to enunciate better. The only weapon you have in law enforcement, hopefully we don't have to use our gun, our taser, our baton. Hopefully it's my voice so I can de-escalate situations. So training my voice is a weapon that I've had to use tens of thousands of times. Thankfully, I've never had to use the firearm. So training your voice, something as simple, Brad, as putting a Hall's Mentoliptus cough drop in your mouth 15 minutes before. That's what I did before I jumped on here. It opens up your nasal passages and it gives you more vocal range. But those are little, drink some tea with honey in it. Little things like that are things that are easy hacks that require no forethought, no practice whatsoever, and could mean the difference in how you do.
Great advice. So how can people, say parents or leaders or partners, apply these skills without, crossing into manipulation or being too obvious about it? Because as a parent of a soon-to-be teenager, you want to be able to understand when things seem a little bit off, but also want to allow her to flourish and thrive. Any thoughts?
Man, it's very difficult. I'm going through that right now. I have a wonderful 14-year-old. What happens between the ages of 12 and 15? Those wonderful hormones change, right? And as a result, they change. And we view it as something's going wrong. That's human nature. They're changing. And we need to understand that. It's hard not to be, I don't know if you call it helicopter parenting over there. That's what we call it here is, we want to put tracking devices on their phone. I do a lot of child exploitation work, and it's the stranger danger. It's, it's not the danger that comes typically from the stranger. It's usually the danger that comes from someone, but we got to be careful about really not letting our kids get out and expose themselves to the real world. Because guess what? At the age of 17, 18, they're going to be going to university and they're going to be exposed to the real world. And if they haven't had to experience it up to that point, it's a real problem. So I know that's not like real advice, but it's being there for them, not judging them, or what I like to say is it's hating the sin, but not hating the sinner. It's understanding that they're going to make mistakes and not judging them as a person, but understanding it's part of the developmental process, and more about being disappointed that they engaged in an action. That's the way I like to view it when I was parenting. I'm disappointed, and not flying off the handle and not getting emotional, because they're already emotional. They're worried about what's going to happen. So it's almost like in law enforcement where we do that de-escalation, where we would bring our voice down. I'm disappointed. Let's talk about it. Because we don't want them to have secrets from us. But at a certain point, we have to let kids be kids, and we have to let them grow up. Because if you don't, the real world's going to hit them pretty soon.
I remember someone saying to me, when they make that mistake when they're 15, you don't want them to be thinking, oh no, my dad is going to kill me. You want them to think,
yes,
oh no, I need to call my dad.
My dad's going to help me. Right.
Yeah,
and that's what I would say is, look, I'm not going to get you out of trouble. I'm not going to make phone calls for you,
Yeah.
but I've lived, and I'm going to be able to provide you some advice on the
Hmm.
mistake that you made. And I'm not going to judge you, son. I'm not going to judge your daughter. You're going to make mistakes in life, and I'm your best friend. So include me in that loop. I won't judge you. All right. That, like you said, that was a really good point that you made there. As far as if your kids feel that, they're never going to tell you anything,
Hmm.
and you're only going to find out when that bad thing happened and it's too late.
Your book. What would you like people to get out of your book? What do you think they'll get out, and where can they find it?
Sure. No, I think find it anywhere books are sold. It doesn't come out till February 17th, but the way publishers, as you know, Brad, they like to get that out early and get those pre-orders in because that always helps. But it's called Tell Me Everything. And what I try to do is distill some of the things I did talking to criminals, talking to protectees, things like that, and find some universal things that parents, teachers, coaches, business people can kind of leverage in their personal situations. So I kind of walk it from preparation of an interaction all the way through if somebody chooses to be dishonest with you, how do we get them to open up to us? So kind of like a soup to nuts of a typical life cycle of a conversation. So we'll see how it goes. I'm really excited about it. And I appreciate, opportunities like this to come on and talk about it. But anybody that definitely wants to reach me, they can go to bradleybeeler.com, kind of like you. Your birth certificate probably says Bradley, but we go by Brad, right?
Yep.
But yeah, bradleybeeler.com. And then, it's on Amazon. So tell me everything.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Brad. It's been a pleasure. One last message for those who stuck with us all
Yeah.
the way to the end.
Oh gosh, that's a great question, Brad. You're throwing me. I should be good when I say improv, right? And you throw me something like that. Be present. Be present in your communications. And what I mean by that is, too often we've got the world's most powerful supercomputer right here. And what we do is we look down on it, we let it ding, we let it focus on our thoughts, and we're missing our kids' lives. We're missing conversations at business. Put your damn phone down, turn it off, silent it, be present in that communications. Because you know what? We get on our kids about doing things like that. We get upset when our kids are playing on the phone how many times. And I'm going to tell you what, we do it just as much as they do. We are
Yeah.
hindered and handcuffed by this same device. Put it down, shut it off, get present in the communication. Don't judge people, and be curious intellectually about what people do in their free time. And you'd be amazing at how you connect with people.
Brad, thank you. It has been a real
Thank you.
pleasure.